The space station floated in the darkness between three distant suns. It was called Orionis, and it was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. Thousands of ships came and went each day. Millions of beings lived inside its curved metal walls. For over 500 years, it had been the center of galactic peace and trade. Una stood near a window on the station's outer ring. She was a small woman, 63 years old, with gray hair tied back in a simple knot. Her face had many lines, especially around her eyes. She wore a dark blue uniform with a small flag on her shoulder. The flag had red, blue, and white colors. It was the flag of her country and of the planet called Earth. She was not alone. Behind her stood three other humans. There was Taiho, a young man of 28 who served as her assistant. He was tall and thin, with quick eyes that noticed everything. There was Minji, a woman of 40 who was an expert in alien languages. And there was Junho, a security officer who stood very still and watched the aliens around them with careful attention. They were the first official human team to visit Orionis. Earth had only been contacted by alien species 20 years ago. For most of that time, humans had been studied from a distance. The aliens wanted to make sure humanity was safe. They wanted to make sure humans would not bring violence to their peaceful galaxy. Now, finally, humanity had been invited to join something called the Galactic Harmony Collective. This was a group of 12 species who had worked together for over 10,000 years. They shared technology. They shared resources. They had no wars, no armies, no weapons. They had forgotten what conflict even meant. Una looked out the window at the stars. She thought about how far she had come. Not just in distance, but in life. When she was a little girl, she could not have imagined standing here. She could not have imagined that humans would ever leave their small blue planet. She could not have imagined peace. A soft sound made her turn. A being was approaching her. It was very tall, almost 3 meters, with silver skin that seemed to glow with soft light. It had 4 arms and a face that was almost human, but not quite. Its eyes were large and purple, and they looked at Una with something like curiosity. This was Thesser, the lead cultural analyst for the Valorian species. The Valorians were one of the founding members of the collective. They had been studying humanity for 2 decades, trying to understand these strange new beings from the edge of the galaxy. Thesser moved with slow, careful steps. Every movement was graceful, like a dance. The Valorians had never known violence. They had never needed to run or fight or hide. They had evolved on a world of peace, and their bodies showed it. "Ambassador Una," Thesser said. The voice was soft and musical, like wind through bells. "I hope the journey was not too difficult for you." Una smiled politely. "It was long, but comfortable. Your ships are very advanced. We are pleased you could come." The Tsar's purple eyes studied her face. "We have many questions about your species. There is much we do not understand. I will try to help you understand," Una said. Thesser tilted their heads slightly. "May I ask, why did your people send you? We noticed that you are quite old by human standards. Your lifespan is short compared to ours. Would it not make more sense to send someone younger?" Una had expected this question. She had thought about it many times on the long journey to Orionis. "Experience has value," she said simply. "I have seen many things in my life. I have learned many lessons. My people thought those lessons might be useful here." Thesser seemed to accept this answer, but Una could see that the alien did not fully understand. The Valorians lived for over 1,000 years. To them, 63 years was nothing. A blink, a moment. What could anyone learn in such a short time? Taiho stepped forward. "Thesser, you said you have questions. What would you like to know about humanity?" "Many things," Thesser said. "But first, We would like to discuss something that has confused our scholars for many years. We have studied your history. We have looked at your records, your stories, your art, and we found something very strange. What did you find? Yuna asked. Desser paused. The silver skin seemed to flicker with uncertain light. We found something called war. The word hung in the air. Yuna felt something cold move through her chest. Beside her, Taiho shifted his weight slightly. Minji's expression did not change, but her hands tightened at her sides. Only Junho remained completely still. We do not fully understand this concept, Desser continued. Our scholars have studied it, but it seems impossible. The idea that beings of the same species would organize to kill each other in large numbers. It does not make sense to us. I see, Yuna said quietly. We would like you to explain it to us. To help us understand. Desser gestured with two of their forearms. We have prepared a presentation. We have gathered information from your historical records. Perhaps you can tell us if we have understood correctly. Yuna looked at Desser for a long moment. The aliens seemed so innocent, so pure. They had no idea what they were asking. They had no idea what door they were about to open. Very well, Yuna said. Show me what you have learned. Desser made a small bow. Please follow me. The council is waiting. Yuna followed the tall silver being down a long curved corridor. Her team walked behind her. None of them spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the station and the click of their shoes on the metal floor. Yuna thought about what was coming. She thought about the things she would have to explain. She thought about the memories she had spent a lifetime trying to forget. The council was waiting. They wanted to understand war, and Yuna knew that she would have to teach them. The council chamber was the largest room Yuna had ever seen. It was shaped like a half circle, with rows of seats rising up like steps in a theater. The ceiling was made of glass, and through it, Yuna could see the endless stars of space. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, soft and warm, without any shadows. The seats were filled with beings from 12 different species. Some were tall, some were short. Some had skin, some had scales, some had shells. Some had 2 eyes, some had many, and some had none at all. They came in every color Yuna could imagine, and some colors she had never seen before. But they all had one thing in common. They all looked at the human delegation with the same expression. It was a mix of curiosity and confusion, like children looking at a puzzle they could not solve. Desser led Yuna and her team to a small platform at the center of the chamber. 4 chairs had been placed there for the humans. They sat down, and Yuna felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon her. A being made entirely of blue crystal stood up from the front row. Its body caught the light and split it into rainbows. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of glass touching glass. I am Vor, speaker for the collective, the crystal being said. We welcome the human delegation to Orionis. We are honored that you have traveled so far to meet with us. Yuna stood and bowed her head slightly. Thank you for inviting us. Humanity is grateful for this opportunity. Vor's crystalline form shifted and sparkled. We have watched your species for 20 of your years. We have seen you grow. We have seen you reach beyond your small planet and touch the stars. We believe you are ready to join our collective. We hope so, Yuna said. But first, Vor continued, we must understand you better. There are aspects of human history that confuse us. We have asked Desser to present our findings. Please sit and listen. Then, perhaps, you can help us understand. Yuna sat back down. Taiho leaned close to her. Are you ready for this? He whispered. No, she whispered back. But it must be done. Desser moved to the center of the platform. The tall silver being raised 2 arms, and suddenly the air was filled with light. Images appeared, floating in the space above them. They were images from Earth's history. We have studied your records carefully, Desser began. We have found many beautiful things. Your art, your music, your stories. Your species has created wonders. But we have also found something that we cannot understand. The images changed. They showed ancient soldiers with swords and shields, marching in long lines. They showed castles burning. They showed bodies lying in fields. You call this war, Desser said. It appears to be a state in which groups of humans organize to kill other groups of humans. They use tools designed only for causing death. They plan and train for these killings. Sometimes, these wars last for many years. The images changed again. Now they showed more recent things. Trenches filled with mud and wire. Planes dropping bombs on cities. A massive cloud shaped like a mushroom, rising over a destroyed city. Several aliens in the chamber made sounds of distress. The Mallory, beings who communicated through the color of their skin, had turned a pale, sick gray. A species with many small tentacles was shaking visibly. We do not understand, Desser said, and there was genuine pain in the musical voice. Why would any species do this to itself? We have searched our history and our ancestors' history for millions of years. We have never found anything like this. The idea of organized killing is foreign to us. Desser turned to look at Una. We have a theory, the Valorian continued. We believe that war was something your species did long ago, when you were still primitive, when you did not have enough food or space. We believe that as your species grew more advanced, you stopped doing this. We believe that war is now just a dark memory for humanity, a shameful past that you have moved beyond. The images faded. The chamber fell silent. Is this correct? Desser asked. Has humanity left war behind? Is that why you were able to reach the stars and contact us? Una did not answer right away. She looked at the faces around her. Thousands of beings who had never known violence, who had never felt the fear of bombs falling at night, who had never seen their families torn apart by forces beyond their control. They were innocent. They were pure. And they wanted to believe that humanity was like them, that humans had grown beyond their violent past and become something better. Una wished she could tell them that was true. Ambassador Una, Vor said, please. We need to understand. How long has humanity been at peace? Una looked at Taiho. He checked his tablet. 72 years, he said quietly. Since our last major conflict. The chamber went completely silent. Even the soft sounds of breathing and movement stopped. Every alien in the room went still. The Tsar's silver skin flickered with unstable light. 72 years? The Valorian said. We were told humanity had achieved peace. We have, Una said. Her voice was calm and steady. By our standards. Vor's crystal form vibrated with a sound like breaking glass. By your standards? The crystal being repeated. What do you mean, by your standards? Una stood up slowly. She looked around the chamber, at all the confused, frightened faces. I mean, she said, that 72 years of peace is the longest period of calm in human history. We are very proud of it. The Mallory had gone almost white. The tentacled species was shaking so hard that it could barely stay in its seat. Desser had taken several steps back from the platform. But surely, Desser said, surely 72 years is enough. Your species has learned. You have grown. You will never return to war again. Yes? Una thought about the question. She thought about the weapons still hidden in underground, bunkers on Earth. She thought about the tensions that still existed between nations. She thought about all the small conflicts that continued even now, too small to be called wars, but deadly just the same. We hope so, she said finally. We try every day. but we cannot promise. The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens were talking to each other, some in languages Yuna could hear, some in ways she could not understand. The fear in the room was thick enough to touch. Vor raised a crystalline limb, and slowly the noise faded. "We need more information," Vor said. "We need to understand the scale of what you are telling us. Ambassador Yuna, please explain. When you say major conflict, what do you mean? How many of your people died in these wars?" Yuna took a deep breath. The hard part was just beginning. Yuna felt the weight of every eye in the chamber. The silence was so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat. Beside her, Taiho sat very still, his tablet resting in his lap. Minji was looking down at her hands. Only Junho seemed unchanged, his face calm and watchful. Vor's crystal form flickered with impatient light. "Ambassador Yuna," the crystal being said again, "please answer. What do you mean by a major conflict? How do you define it?" Yuna clasped her hands in front of her. She had practiced this speech many times. She had prepared for this moment. But now that it was here, the words felt heavy on her tongue. "A major conflict," she said slowly, "is what we call a war that involves multiple nations. A war that lasts for a significant time. A war that results in more than 100,000 deaths." The chamber went completely still. Several aliens stopped moving entirely. The Malari, whose skin showed their emotions, had gone from white to a color Yuna had never seen before. It was the color of deep shock, of something breaking inside. Lesser stepped forward, the silver being's graceful movements now jerky and uncertain. 100,000? Lesser repeated. "You mean 100,000 of your own species? Dead?" "Yes," Yuna said. "Per conflict?" "Yes." Lesser made a sound that Yuna did not recognize. It might have been a cry of pain. The Valorian turned to the other delegates, then back to Yuna. "And how many of these major conflicts has your species experienced?" Yuna looked at Taiho. He checked his tablet, scrolling through the data they had prepared. "In recorded history," Taiho said, his voice quiet but clear, "humanity has fought approximately 15,000 wars." 15,000, Vor repeated. The crystal being's voice had lost its musical quality. It sounded flat, broken. "And the total deaths from these wars?" Taiho paused. His finger hovered over the tablet. Yuna knew he was thinking about whether to tell them, whether the truth would be too much. But they had agreed before coming here. They would not lie. They would not hide. "The total estimated deaths from warfare in human history," Taiho said, "is over 1 billion. Something happened in the chamber. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like a wave of feeling that passed through the room. Horror, disbelief, fear. The emotions were so strong that even Yuna, who could not read alien faces well, could feel them. A being with many tentacles made a wet, choking sound and had to be helped from the room. The Malori had stopped changing colors entirely. They sat frozen, their skin a dead gray. One species, that looked like floating clouds of gas, had spread thin across the ceiling, as if trying to get as far from the humans as possible. Lesser approached Yuna slowly, the tall silver being moved as if walking through water, each step careful and afraid. "Over 1 billion, Lesser said. "Of your own people. By your own hands." "Yes," Yuna said. "How is this possible?" The Tsar's musical voice cracked with emotion. "How can any species survive such destruction? How can you continue to exist?" Yuna thought about the question. It was a question she had asked herself many times. How had humanity survived? How had they kept going through world wars and genocides, through nuclear threats and endless smaller conflicts? "We are difficult to kill," she said simply. "And we are very good at having children." This answer seemed to disturb the aliens even more. Ver's crystal form was now vibrating constantly, making a low humming sound that Yuna could feel in her chest. "Let me understand," Vor said. "Your species has killed over 1 billion of its own members in organized conflicts. You have developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities. You have created tools designed only for death. And yet you sit here calmly, discussing this as if it were simply history, as if it were normal." "Because for us," Yuna said, "it is normal." The cloud species on the ceiling made a sound like distant thunder. Several delegates were now openly leaving the chamber, unable to stay in the presence of the humans any longer. "We invited you here," Vor said, "because we believed you were peaceful. Our observers reported that you had stopped fighting, that you had learned to live together, that you had become safe. We are more peaceful now than we have ever been," Yuna said. 72 years without a major war is unprecedented for our species. We are trying. We are learning. But you still have weapons, Desser said. Our scans of your planet showed them. Weapons that can destroy continents. Weapons that can poison the air and water for generations. You still have these things. You still keep them ready. Lena did not deny it. She could not deny it. "Yes," she said. "We do." "Why?" Desser asked. The word was almost a plea. Why would you keep such terrible things if you truly want peace? Yuna was silent for a long moment. She thought about all the reasons her people gave. Deterrence, defense, security. But those were just words. The truth was simpler and sadder. "Because we do not trust ourselves," she said finally. "We do not trust each other. We keep the weapons because we fear that someday someone will start another war. And when that happens, we want to be able to finish it." The chamber was almost empty now. Many species had left, unable to process what they were hearing. Those who remained looked at the humans with something new in their eyes. It was not just curiosity or confusion anymore. It was fear. Vor moved closer to the platform where the humans sat. The crystal being's form was smaller now, pulled tight as if trying to protect itself. "Ambassador Yuna," Vor said, "you speak of these things so calmly, so matter-of-factly. We have been trying to understand your species for 20 years, but now I think we do not understand you at all." Yuna met the crystal being's gaze. "No," she said quietly. "I do not think you do." Desser stepped forward again. The silver being's purple eyes were fixed on Yuna's face with intense focus. "Ambassador," Desser said, "you are 63 years old. You said you have seen many things, that you have learned many lessons. Tell me, have you ever witnessed this thing called war? Have you ever seen it with your own eyes?" The chamber went quiet. Even the few remaining delegates stopped their whispered conversations. Everyone was looking at the small, gray-haired human woman. Yuna felt something shift inside her. A door that she had kept locked for many years. A room full of memories that she had tried so hard to forget. She looked at Desser. She looked at Vor. She looked at all the innocent, peaceful beings who had never known violence, who had never smelled smoke and blood, who had never heard the screams of the dying. "Yes," she said. Her voice was very soft. "I have." Desser leaned forward. "Tell us," the Valorian said. "Help us understand. What is war really like? Not the numbers, not the history. What is it like to live through it?" Yuna closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was no longer an ambassador Dodd. She was a 7-year-old girl, watching her father walk away into the smoke. The remaining delegates settled into their seats. Even the beings who had been leaving stopped at the doors. Something in Yuna's voice had changed. It was no longer the calm, measured tone of a diplomat. It was something older, something raw. Yuna kept her eyes closed for a moment longer. When she opened them, she did not look at anyone in particular. She looked past them all, into a distance that only she could see. I was born in a city by the sea, she began. My father was a fisherman. Every morning, he would wake before the sun and walk to the harbor. I loved to watch him go. He always turned back at the corner of our street to wave at me. I would wave back until he disappeared. She paused. Her hands were very still in her lap. My mother was a teacher. She taught young children to read and write. She was kind and patient. She always smelled like the flowers she kept on the windowsill. My baby brother was named Jinu. He was only 2 years old. He liked to laugh. He laughed at everything. The chamber was completely silent. No one moved. One day, when I was 7 years old, the war came. It came suddenly, like a storm. One morning, everything was normal. By afternoon, there were soldiers in the streets. By evening, the sky was on fire. The Tsar's silver form was very still. The tall being had stopped flickering entirely. I remember the sound most of all, Yuna continued. The sound of bombs. They made a whistling noise as they fell. Then a boom that shook the ground. Then silence. Then screaming. You could always tell how close they were by how long the silence lasted between the whistle and the boom. She looked down at her hands. My father joined the resistance on the first day. He said he had to protect us. He said he would come back soon. He kissed my mother. He picked me up and held me tight. Then he walked out the door. He turned at the corner to wave, just like always. I waved back. That was the last time I ever saw him. A small sound came from somewhere in the chamber. It might have been crying. Yuna did not look up to see. My mother packed whatever she could carry. Clothes, rice, a blanket for Jinu, her wedding ring. She put Jinu in a cloth on her back and took my hand. We walked out of our home. Behind us, I could see smoke rising from the harbor where my father used to fish. She took a slow breath. We walked for many days. Sometimes north, sometimes south. The fighting kept moving, so we had to keep moving too. There were other families on the roads. Many, many families. Some had carts. Some had nothing at all. The old people walked slowly. The young children were carried. Everyone was afraid. Minji had turned her face away. Her shoulders were shaking slightly. Junho's face was stone, but his hands were clenched tight. At night, we slept wherever we could find shelter. Under bridges, in empty buildings, in fields with no cover at all. My mother would hold Jinu in her arms and hold me close. She would sing soft songs to help us sleep. But the songs could not cover the sounds. The distant booms. The planes overhead. The crying from other families nearby. Yuna's voice remained steady, but there was a heaviness in it that pressed down on everyone who listened. Food became hard to find. Clean water was even harder. We drank from streams when we could, but the streams were not always clean. There were things in the water. Dead things. We drank anyway, because we had no choice. The cloud species on the ceiling had descended lower. They had formed into a tight cluster, as if seeking comfort in each other. Jinu got sick. He was so small. His body could not fight the illness. My mother tried everything. She traded her wedding ring for medicine that did not work. She begged doctors who had nothing to give. She held him all night, every night, rocking him and singing to him. Yuna stopped. For the first time, her voice wavered. He died in a refugee camp in the mountains. He was 2 years and 4 months old. He died crying because he was hungry and we had no food. He died calling for our father who was already gone. Desser made a sound. It was a sound of pure grief, high and broken. We buried him under a tree near the camp. My mother put a small stone on the grave. She did not cry. She had no tears left. She just stood there, looking at the stone, until I took her hand and led her away. Yuna looked up now. Her eyes were dry, but something terrible lived in them. "That is what war looks like," she said. "Not the numbers. Not the history books. It looks like a 2-year-old boy dying of hunger and sickness while his mother sings to him. It looks like a little girl burying her brother under a tree. It looks like an empty street corner where no one will ever wave again." The chamber was absolutely silent. By the time the fighting stopped, I was 10 years old. My father was never found. My brother was dead. My home was destroyed. 1 out of every 5 people in my country was dead or missing. 1 out of every 5. She stood up from her chair. Even standing, she was very small. Smaller than almost everyone in the room. But somehow, in that moment, she seemed larger than all of them. "That was 72 years ago," she said. "I've spent my entire life since then trying to make sure it never happens again. I became a diplomat because I believe that talking is better than killing. I learned other languages because I believe that understanding is better than fear. I came here, to the edge of the galaxy, because I believe that connection is better than isolation." She looked around the chamber at all the peaceful, innocent faces. "But I did not come here as someone who's only read about war. I did not come here as a scholar or a theorist. I came here as someone who crawled through the ashes. Someone who buried her brother with her own hands. Someone who still wakes up in the night sometimes, listening for the sound of bombs." Ver's crystal form was trembling. Small pieces of light scattered across the walls. "You wanted to explain war to me," Yuna said. "You showed me your pictures and your theories. But you cannot explain war to someone who has lived it. You can only try to understand why we are the way we are. Why we carry this weight. Why we flinch at loud noises. Why we keep weapons even though we pray we will never use them." She looked directly at Desser. "You asked why we sent an old woman. Now you know. We sent someone who remembers. We sent someone who will never forget. Because peace for humanity is not something we inherited. It is something we build every single day, with full knowledge of what happens when we fail." Desser bowed their head. His crystal form pulsed with soft, sad light. Taiho stood up and moved to Yuna's side. He did not touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. "That is the answer to your question," Yuna said quietly. "That is what war is. That is what humanity carries. And that is why we want to join you. Not because we have forgotten our past, but because we remember it. Every single day." She sat back down. The silence in the chamber was complete. The silence lasted for a very long time. No one moved. No one spoke. The stars turned slowly outside the glass ceiling, uncaring and cold. Finally, Desser stepped forward. The tall silver being moved slowly, each step careful and deliberate. When Desser spoke, the musical voice was soft and full of something that sounded like sorrow. "Ambassador Yuna," Desser said, "we owe you an apology." Yuna looked up, surprised. Of all the responses she had expected, this was not one of them. "We invited you here to study you," Desser continued. "To understand you. To decide if you were safe enough to join our collective. We looked at your history and saw violence. We saw death. We saw weapons and wars and destruction. And we judge you for it." The Valorian's silver skin flickered with unstable light. "We thought we were better than you. We thought that because we had never known war, we were more advanced, more civilized, more worthy. We prepared our presentation to show you what you were, as if you did not already know. As if you had not lived it." Desser bowed deeply, all 4 arms folded against the silver chest. "We were wrong. And we are sorry." Vor moved forward as well. The crystal being's form was no longer vibrating. It had settled into a calm, steady glow. "Ambassador Yuna," Vor said, "we have been peaceful for 10,000 years. In that time, we have never faced a real threat. We have never had to choose between violence and extinction. We have never had to fight for survival." The crystal being paused. "We assumed that our peace was an achievement, that we had earned it through wisdom and advancement. But now I wonder, perhaps we were simply lucky. Perhaps peace was easy for us because no one ever tried to take it away." Yuna listened quietly. She had not expected this conversation to go this way. "You told us that humanity has been at peace for 72 years, Vor continued. Before, that number seemed small to us, insignificant, but now I think I understand it differently. 72 years for a species that has known war since the beginning. 72 years of choosing peace every single day, despite everything that has happened. Despite all the reasons you have to hate each other." Vor's crystal form pulsed with warm light. "That is not insignificant. That is remarkable." Vesser spoke again. "You asked earlier why we invited you to the collective. We told you it was because you had achieved stability, because you had reached the stars. But those were not the real reasons." The Valorian looked around the chamber at the remaining delegates. "The real reason is that we are afraid. For 10,000 years, we have been at peace. But we know that the galaxy is large. We know that somewhere out there may be species that are not peaceful. Species that would want to take what we have. Species that would bring violence to our doorstep." Vesser looked back at Yuna. "We have no experience with such things. We would not know what to do. We would not know how to protect ourselves." The silver being paused. "But you would." Yuna felt something cold move through her chest. "You want us because we know how to fight," she said quietly. "Yes," Vesser admitted. "That was part of it. But now, after hearing your story, I think we want you for a different reason." "What reason?" Vesser moved closer to the platform. The purple eyes looked directly into Yuna's. "Because you know what war costs. You know what it takes from everyone who touches it. And despite knowing that, despite carrying that weight every day, you still choose peace. You still try to build something better." The Valorian's voice softened. "That is not weakness, Ambassador Yuna. That is strength. Real strength. The kind that we have never had to develop." Vor stepped forward as well. "We would like to take a vote now," the crystal being announced, "on whether humanity should be admitted to the Galactic Harmony Collective." The remaining delegates shifted in their seats. The Mallory, whose skin had slowly returned to its normal colors, turned to face the platform. The cloud species descended from the ceiling and formed into a compact shape. Other beings, representatives of species Yuna did not know, leaned forward to listen. "All those in favor of admitting humanity," Vor said, "please indicate now." For a moment, nothing happened. Yuna held her breath. She had told them the truth. The full, terrible truth about what humanity was. She had not hidden anything. She had not made excuses. And now they would decide. Vesser was the first to respond. The tall silver being raised all four arms in a gesture that Yuna understood was a vote of approval. One by one, the other delegates followed. The Mallory's skin turned a bright, hopeful blue. The cloud species chimed with high, clear sounds. Var's crystal form rang like a bell. Every single delegate voted yes. Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them back, but they came anyway. Vor moved to stand directly in front of her. "Welcome to the Galactic Harmony Collective, Ambassador Yuna," the crystal being said. "We accept humanity not because you are peaceful, but because you understand peace. Not because you are perfect, but because you try to be better. Not because you have forgotten your past, but because you have learned from it. Una stood and bowed deeply. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was thick. "We will try to be worthy of your trust." "We know you will," Vor said, "because you know what happens when trust fails. You know better than any of us." Thesser approached and extended one silver hand in a gesture that Una recognized. The Valorians had learned it from their studies of humanity. It was a handshake. Una took the hand and shook it. "Perhaps," Thesser said, "you can teach us someday. Teach us what you have learned. Not about war, but about choosing peace despite everything. About building bridges instead of walls. About carrying the weight of the past while still walking toward the future." Una smiled. It was a real smile, tired but genuine. "I would be honored," she said. Taeho moved to stand beside her. Minji wiped her eyes and joined them. Even Junho's stone face had softened slightly. Together, the four humans stood in the council chamber of Orionis, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy. Behind them, through the glass ceiling, the stars turned in their endless dance. Humanity had been accepted, not for what they had been, but for what they could become. And somewhere, in a small corner of Una's heart, a 7-year-old girl finally stopped waiting at the corner of a burning street. Her father was never coming back. Her brother was buried under a tree far away. The old world was gone forever, but something new was beginning. And maybe, just maybe, it would be worth all the pain it had taken to get here. Una looked up at the stars. "We did it." "Jinu," she whispered, too soft for anyone else to hear. "We made it." And somewhere, in the space between the stars, she thought she heard the sound of a little boy laughing.